Hey, Mac. It's 10:30. We've got some people logged on and we'll let them in as they come on. But if you want to get started, I think we're good to go.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Helen Mack. I go by the name Mack. It was my dad's nickname and it's become my nickname. And I'm a volunteer with AARP. And I'm here today to share with you a conversation about fraud prevention and AARP's Fraud Watch Network. So you're probably wondering, why in the world would AARP be concerned about fraud? Well, it was created a while ago to empower consumers to spot and avoid scams and to provide support and guidance to victims and their families when fraud happens. In addition to attending sessions like this today, you can find a wealth of resources at aarp.org/Fraud Watch Network. So some of you are probably asking, why is AARP into fraud? Well, it turns out that the founder of AARP, Ethel Percy Sanders, was an educator out in California. And when she retired, she went to find one of the teachers she had. She was one of the first women superintendents. And the woman was living in a chicken coop. And she decided that, in fact, people needed to have a little bit more financial protection. And part of that is the reason that we are now into making sure that people who are, as they age, have financial protection. And a lot of that includes protecting your wealth through avoiding having any aspect of scam or fraud affect you. So that's what I'm about today. We're going to share with you some of the thoughts we've had on scams and some of the reasons we need to be really careful about it. So the reality is the best thing you can do is prevent it, because once scams have happened or fraud has happened, the chance of you being reimbursed or getting back what you've lost is really, really small. So today our agenda is going to be to look at the trends in scams and frauds. I'll share with you some of the information that AARP has gathered in what we call the Con Artist Playbook. And we'll talk about prevention, and then we'll talk about some of the resources that you can get your hands on through AARP. So how many of you think that you have already been approached by someone who has made a fraudulent offer or who was into some kind of scam? And I'm going to bet that most of us have had that experience. And if you're on a computer, you've probably had more of those experiences than you ever wanted. And when you think of those scams, what do you think the top scams are? I'm going to give you a second to think about that. What do you think the scam artists use as the top ones? How are you more likely than not to get scammed or be a victim of fraud? Got an idea? Well, here are the top three: identity theft, imposter scams, and online shopping. We spend time talking through each of these today, and we can speak in terms of how each is connected to the pandemic also. Even though we feel that the pandemic has created problems, we didn't realize it would also create great opportunities for people who were into fraud to scam us even further. So let's talk about the first one. What is identity theft? Identity theft is when someone steals your personal information, like your name, social security number, bank account information. Identity theft becomes identity fraud when a criminal uses that information to steal money. Identity fraud can include opening credit accounts in your name and racking up thousands of dollars of debt. It can mean a scammer draining your bank accounts or applying for government benefits in your name. Identity fraud can even involve filing bogus tax returns. So if you know somebody who has had their identity stolen, you know that it's really a difficult process to unwind. So it's not surprising that identity theft is a multi-billion-dollar industry. That was a B in billion-dollar industry. Consumers and financial institutions have lost $16.9 billion in identity fraud in 2019 alone. And that was up 15% from 2018. During the pandemic and economic turndown, we learned of millions of dollars hijacked from unemployment benefits. Thieves who would use stolen identity to file for unemployment benefits, directing the payments to themselves. Eventually, the victim of the fraud gets a letter confirming that her benefits are over, and she learns that she's been defrauded. And at that point, it starts the pain of getting a lawyer and figuring out how to undo that fraud. Identity theft, okay? So it's one of those things that we really would like to avoid as much as possible. And we have to do it by being very alert. The next kind, and we'll talk a little bit more about identity theft later. So the next one we mentioned was imposter schemes. Imposter scams involve criminals impersonating someone to coerce targets into giving them money. These criminals impersonate federal government workers, sheriffs, tech support workers, even family or friends. The Federal Trade Commission reports that Americans lost $498 million in imposter scams through just the third quarter of 2020. We know that scams and frauds are underreported, so the losses are probably much higher than that. The primary approach typically starts with a robot call or a live call, and it scares the person. Someone saying they're from Social Security and there's suspicious activity and they need to check on your Social Security number. And if you don't call back that given number, you're going to face arrest. Another common imposter scam is the grandparent scam, and this will get an older adult every time. The target is a frantic call from someone claiming to be their grandchild or the grandchild's attorney, and they need your help right away to get them out of some mess they're in, either a speeding ticket or a drug charge. Often the ruse is for bail money, and he was in a friend's car and they got pulled over and the police found drugs. So to keep them out of this, the grandparent is asked to send money right away. Wire the money or purchase gift cards and read the account number and PIN number off the back. And as soon as the money is wired and shared via gift cards, it disappears. During the pandemic, criminals posed as Medicare, calling to offer beneficiaries a free COVID test. Can you guess what their goal was? They wanted to steal the Medicare numbers and falsely bill millions in bogus claims to Medicare. They posed as IRS, calling for your bank information to process your stimulus payment. They even set up fake testing sites, all to collect cash or Medicare numbers for administering fake tests. So we've covered the top 3 scams happening around the US, and let's look into some of the others. I want you to meet this guy. He's Steve. He's 58 years old and has a graduate degree and made his living as a successful stockbroker. He lost $40,000 to a fraudulent oil and gas investment out of Dallas, Texas. common means of con artists committing investment fraud is through free lunch seminars. The scammer invites a bunch of people to a seminar and then presents an unbeatable investment opportunity. You must sign up right here, right now. And you can't sign up later because the presenter's leaving with your town in 2 hours with your money. Of course, this is not to say that all free lunch seminars are potential scams. There are many legitimate businesses that use the tactic of offering a free lunch to present a sales pitch to a captive audience. However, we're going to urge you to be very wary and employ very healthy skepticism. Free lunches aren't happening so much these days during COVID, but criminals are finding other ways to target people. You may get phone calls, emails, text messages, or you can see advertisements online or on TV and radio to call now for a once-in-a-lifetime investment opportunity. A massive investment scam was uncovered in Washington state in the period following the arrest of Bernie Madoff in New York for the biggest investment fraud scam on record. Over the course of several years, Darren Berg cheated hundreds of investors out of more than $100 million through the Meridian Group, the company he ran in Seattle. Berg spent the money on cars, yachts, a waterfront mansion, and a full-time staff. He flew between there and his homes in California on one of 2 private jets. One of Berg's victims was a retired U.S. attorney who specialized in prosecuting people accused of investment fraud schemes. So everybody can be a victim. Berg was serving an 18-year federal prison sentence when one morning guards found him missing. He is still on the run. Another scam are lotteries and fake prizes. Scams are extremely common and they reap millions from unsuspecting targets. Just through the third quarter of 2020, reports from the Federal Trade Commission came in at nearly 99 million. And we know that all scams and frauds are underreported, as I said before, so it's probably a lot higher. The ruse is to get the target, which is you, excited that they supposedly won some huge sweepstake. Then the criminals string the victim along, requiring continuous payments of taxes and upfront fees for them to get you that big lottery win. Jean was one of those victims. She received a call from a man telling her she won $7.9 million in the Jamaican lottery. All she had to do was pay the taxes to collect. And over a 6-month period, this man called Jean hundreds of times and convinced her to wire $30,000 in taxes and processing fees to Jamaica. You know, it's hard for us to understand how this could happen, and we'll talk about it later. And that's about why scammers are so successful. And hint, it's often not the victim's fault. Another all too common fraud is known as the tech support scam. This scam commonly originates in another country from a bustling call center. It can start in a variety of ways. Typically, the target gets a phone call, someone impersonating Microsoft or some other big tech company, claiming they've identified a virus on the target's device. Or the target sees a pop-up on their screen with a warning that something's wrong with their device and to call the toll-free number immediately. The ultimate objective of the thief is to convince the target to give him remote access to the target's device. And this allows the thief to do things like upload software that harvests the target's credentials and to convince the target that the virus must be fixed immediately for a fee. Some thieves are audacious enough to sell the victim a bogus subscription for tech support services. I have a brother who was really kind of a bit of a Luddite, and he got one of these calls about how his computer really had this bug, and they needed to get into it so that he could be safe when he used the computer. And Warren kept that guy on the phone for 2 hours. And finally, the man said, "Will you just let me have access to your device by doing," and he shared the procedure to use. And Warren said, "Well, you'll just have to wait a minute because I'll have to go buy one first." And I said, "Warren, what did you think you were doing?" And he said, "I was keeping the guy from scamming somebody else for a while and enjoying the process." We don't recommend you do that kind of thing. We recommend that you just hang up or don't answer the phone in the first place. But you can't talk to my brother about that. So how is it that these criminal scammers succeed? When we look at a scam after the fact, it's hard to imagine how we would be victim to something so obvious. But the reality is these criminals are sophisticated and typically are part of an organized crime ring with money, access to the tools of their trade. And when you think about the power imbalance, it's easy to understand why they're so successful. So let's look inside something we call the con artist playbook. Where do we get these insights for this con artist playbook? Well, they came from two sources. First, from Understanding Fraud Works from the jailhouse interviews that have been done. And the second one is from an analysis of hundreds of undercover audio tapes received from law enforcement. So there's lots of data that goes into the information I'm about to share on the next couple of slides. So here are some of the quotes that we were able to pull from some recorded calls from scammers. A lot of people are getting calls like this, and they focus on getting potential victims into an emotional state, perhaps of fear or of need. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. So if you don't want to make up your mind right now, that's where I come in. I'll help you make it up. Oh boy. And people get themselves in a state where they listen. So this is Jimmy Edwards. He's kind of a star of the scammers. He's worked in over 30 of what are called boiler rooms over an 8-year period. These are offices that scammers use to call potential targets. Jimmy claims to have taken in $60 million. His specialty was business opportunity scams. In his interview, he described how skilled fraudsters like him will stop at nothing to reach their goal of getting your money. And as you can see from this one quote, he admits that he and other scammers are dangerous and persistent. When authorities asked convicted con artists to describe this, how did they do it? They get them under the ether. So what is ether? Ether is a heightened emotional state that makes it hard to think clearly and make rational decisions. Scammers know that once they get the target out of their logical mind and into an emotional state, they've won. Scammers have a range of persuasive tactics that they use, and they use them rather well. AARP listened to all those audio tapes that I told you about and coded them to the persuasive tactics that are listed here. So let's take a closer look at the 5 most common tactics identified by cons and see if you've heard anyone talk about these before. Phantom riches are something you really want and become excited about. Scammers will dangle the possibility of wealth in front of their targets. A con artist named Jeremy sold overpriced coins to seniors. He describes the use of phantom riches this way. We'd tell people that gold would absolutely double in value in the next 2 years, and the prospect would be able to rely on it, making them far more money than any other investment vehicle. So let's look at this in the statements on this slide. Scammers develop a victim profile by asking a series of personal questions so that they can find out what your emotional trigger is. Look at the one about seeing if a woman was a widow. Talking about the pride of home ownership. You can see how it would get someone into an emotional state. And the longer they can keep you on a call, the easier it gets for them to gather information, put it together with the information they've gotten from other sources like Facebook profiles, and then get you to be a victim of their next scheme. So look at these. How do those statements make you feel? Many of you have seen going out of business sales that seem to last forever, or one day only sales that happen every other week. Those are fraudulent. So con artists often build credibility by using a well-known celebrity appearing successful, claiming affiliation with a reputable organization, or touting a special credential or experience. Common source credibility scams include IRS, Social Security, and during COVID, scammers also have been impersonating the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the World Health Organization. Really sad, isn't it? So fear and intimidation are used to scare targets into handing over their money. It's not uncommon for some con artists to use threats and call targets 50 to 60 times a day. Remember the story earlier about the woman with the lottery fraud? Well, when the victim finally stopped answering her phone, the scammer left threatening voicemail messages on her answering machine. Why don't you want to pick up that phone? Bleeping out a few expletives. Pick up the phone when I'm calling you and stop playing games with me. You want me to come over there and set your home on fire? That's that fear piece that we were talking about. So we know that knowing about a scam helps defend us against it. Research has found that if you know about a specific scam, you're 80% less likely to engage in it. And if you do engage in it, you're 40% likely to not become a victim. So now that we know the common persuasion tactics used, I'm going to take you through a few quick slides about how to use prevention. So this one, back in Philadelphia, from the Philadelphia Mint, this is the coins, and they're rare. So that's the scarcity tactic they use. This one I enjoy. This one is, flipping houses and how much money you can make for flipping houses. And there was one real estate guy, this John Beck free and clear real estate system, who had secret strategies, and you could buy a house or property for pennies and on the dollar and own it free and clear. And he was selling books, and he made a fortune doing it. So here's another example that's using one of the techniques to convince you to make a purchase. It's from one of those cable channels that sell products that you order by phone. Looking at the quotes, you can see that something simple is for sale as a shim, and he makes it sound like it's going out there. They're not going to have any left if you don't hurry up and get it, because that counter's going up and you're going to miss this opportunity. So there are a number of things that you can do to protect you and your loved ones from the tactics that scammers use. Avoid making a financial decision in a heightened emotional state. Do your research. Only donate to charity that you already know and trust, or only if you've researched the charity to make sure your money is going to the cause that you care about. If someone's trying to get you to invest your money with them, look them up. If they aren't registered, they aren't legitimate. Be mindful that scammers are adept at using robocalls, emails, texts, and even social media posts in convincing ways. And don't rely on caller ID to verify who's calling. Let your calls go to voicemail or your answering machine. You can call back the people you know and trust. Be mindful that scammers send fake emails and texts to try getting you to click on a link or share sensitive personal information. Engage your inner skeptic before responding or reacting. And develop a refusal script to stop unwanted interactions. It's a great way to end a conversation, simply saying, "No, thank you, goodbye." Or even better, don't pick up the phone. So here are some additional ideas and resources. Only share your Social Security number and other sensitive personal information with those you know and trust and who need it for a specific reason. Don't share this information with anyone who contacts you out of the blue. Shred sensitive information. I know we hear about these data breaches where our sensitive information is exposed, but there's still dumpster divers who are out there looking for account statements. So when AARP has a shredathon in your area, and we have them often, take your personal communications that have those kinds of information on them and get them shredded. Contact your creditors if a bill doesn't arrive when expected or includes charges you didn't consider, because often they're looking in the mailboxes. Consider banking with your financial institution online or with their app if they have one. This way, you can look at your transactions wherever you want, and you don't have to have the paper copies around. You can also set up alerts to notify you of your account activity. You might want to consider placing a free fraud alert on your credit reports. This makes it a requirement that a lender must ensure that you're the one requesting a loan or opening a credit card, or you can freeze those cards also. It's a good idea to do that. And you can also get a free annual credit report call. And I'm going to share a website with you where you can handle all of these. Well, you're going to see all of this information again. So the other piece is to keep your computer device updated. Always install an update when you're prompted, as the new version is often replacing something where a criminal exploited. So this goes for your device's security, such as the firewall, the antivirus software, and the anti-malware. Make sure that you're running these programs and keeping them current. And for heaven's sakes, protect your passwords. Don't share them with anyone. Don't write them down. Store them safely. And use a unique password for each online account that you have. I know it's hard to do that, but if a scammer cracks one password and you've used it on multiple sites, they have access to all those accounts too. You might even want to consider a password manager. This is a tool that's online that creates and safely stores unique passwords for all of your accounts. And you can look up that information online to find one that fits your needs. So the AARP Fraud Watch Network is a great resource to keep you on the latest scams. Visit aarp.org www.fraud watch network for news and information, to sign up for scam alerts, and to tune into the hit podcast called AARP's The Perfect Scam. It's an award-winning show that takes you into the inner workings of scams and how they work. If you want to report a scam, find out if something is real or fake, or help if you or a loved one have fallen victim to a scam, we invite you to call the free AARP Fraud Watch Network helpline, where you can connect with trained fraud specialists. The number is 877-908-3360. You don't have to be a member or a certain age to call. And this information is on the website also, where it's a lot easier to get a hold of. So you've learned some good information today about kinds of scams going on and the ways you can protect yourself. We reviewed scams and fraud. We got inside the mind of a scammer, and we discussed common persuasion topics. So AARP is really all about making sure that you empower yourself to protect yourself from fraud and scams. Vigilance against scammers is the number one way to do this. It's the number one weapon. By taking a few practical steps, you have the power to protect yourself and your family and stop fraud before it happens. AARP Fraud Watch Network puts proven tools and resources right into your fingertips, from news articles to fraud watch literacy quizzes to scam tracking map. You can go in, look for your town on this map, and it'll tell you what's going on in your area. And that's on that website. So there's power in numbers. So the more people who know about this and get involved, the better it is for us. And remember that everything AARP offers is free. The website, this workshop, and other workshops. So I'd like to thank you very much for joining us today. And I hope that you remember that if you can spot a scam, you can stop a scam. Thank you. I'm going to hand it back over to somebody in Jamestown Civic Center.
Thank you so much, Mack. Do you have some time for some questions?
I do. Now, I'm not an expert. I've got a lot of experience from it, but I'm not an expert in it, but I can tell you where to get the information.
Anybody have questions?
Is there a way to stop scam phone calls? We have a landline and that's all we get.
I cannot hear the question.
Question was, is there a way to stop scam phone calls? They have a landline and that's the only calls they ever get.
You know, you can do the call prevention piece where you stop calls, but you know what? Fraudsters and scamsters, they're not paying any attention to that whatsoever. The only way to do that is to just not answer the phone. Just make it go to your app. If you don't recognize the number, if there's an ID on it, don't answer it. If you don't recognize it, it can go to your answering. If people want to get a hold of you, they're going to leave a message on your answering machine. So just don't answer the phone, because fraudsters really don't care that there's a stop call policy in this country. You know, they're not following the rules in any way, shape, or form. So I'm sorry. And it used to be only landlines that had that problem, but now you have to be careful on your cell phone, because they've got a hold of your cell phones now too. Pitiful. Sorry about that. That's one of those where you have to really make sure that you spot it so you can stop it before it happens.
Anything else? If anyone else has any questions, now's the chance. Otherwise, thank you so much, Mack. It's been really a great presentation.
Make sure you check out the website because honestly, it is filled with information and it's always kept up to date. Thank you for having me. AARP appreciates the chances to share this information.
Thank you.